Thanks, Bruce. Can you hear me? I'm not used to miking up, but if you can't hear me, raise your hand. Thank you, Bruce. And Bruce has taught at least for 10 years in our Brown Bag Bible study, which started in my office with one student I had taught in my church and various other churches, but the Brown Bag thing was about 15 years ago. And first it was one student, and he was an engineer, very technical. He's going through a lot of trauma in his life and wanted detailed information about what was in the Bible. He ended up coming in almost every noon hour all through the summer, and then at the end he was baptized. And then the next year there were like 8 or 10 people, and then we moved from conference room to conference room. Pretty soon there were 20. And we moved to Independent Bank, which is Independent Bank now, and then Front Range Christian Fellowship. They saw we weren't going to leave for a long time, and the bank says you better wrap it up after this year, and so we went to Front Range Christian Fellowship. Gary Jefferson, a wonderful pastor, he said, "You sound like you're homeless," and we have a homeless ministry. So we've taught there then for about 10 years. My wife also is very helpful and also teaches. She's a precept ministry teacher, retired school principal, college professor, all kinds of careers, backup paralegal. I keep saying you're like the little Dutch with a finger in the dike. She's a female. But Deanna has, I think, been teaching 18 years at Precept, and the bottom line is not my book. The bottom line is in this culture is to get into it. If you haven't been in a systematic Bible study, if you have been, make sure you're reading the Bible every day. And if you haven't, it's something that everyone should do. Bible study, fellowship, Precept, community Bible study, all real good ones. And this culture is coming in on us in an incredible way. We had riots in Boulder last night over Halloween, I guess. By the way, happy All Hallows Ween Day. Halloween started in pre-Christian England, France, and maybe Ireland as a celebration of demons and gulags and things like that. It was not Christian, not Jewish either. And the Christians after Jesus had decided to move their All Saints celebration to the night before Halloween. That's what Halloween actually means. But Halloween's a more serious thing that Satan loves it when you make fun of him and say, we don't believe in that anymore. This is just all good fun. But the truth is half of Americans, and that includes Christians, no longer believe in Satan. And so if anything, we need to realize that Jesus talked about Satan all the time. He was attacked himself in the desert in Matthew 4 and Luke 4 by Satan, and he told us how to refute Satan and his demons, and I will bring that up at the end of the class. But the culture has slipped. When I was a kid in Minnesota, largely a Catholic town, but lots of Christians, 95% of the community was probably Christian or claimed to be. At Easter, we let off, the schools let out on Good Friday. We went around and had an ecumenical thing in the community where we would hear the 7 last words of Christ. And it was a tremendous thing. Well, 95% now is 48%. In Barna and Pew and Gallup all pretty much agree. Only 48% in their surveys will check Judeo-Christian in the box. Now, of that group, 65% of Christians that are surveyed, which is part of this 48%, would really have New Age beliefs. So that's what we're going to talk about. What are these beliefs? And the other thing that is dramatically different, and the figures get higher and higher, is how many people in the survey check nuns. And the nuns are heavily populated by millennials, and they check the box nun. And I've interviewed or talked to various nuns folks, and when you strip it all away, they have basic New Age beliefs. If I were a nun, I would really be worshiping Davidism or Bruceism. They're self-absorbed, and that's what New Age is all about. The first New Ager, of course, was Eve. The serpent told her, "Surely you will not die. You will be like God, knowing good and evil." And Satan enticed her into believing she had godlike qualities and could share power with him. But defining the New Age, and I have it in the outline, is pretty difficult. Some scholars have characterized it as extremely complex. Others have said it's regressively infantile. Professor Groothuis, who also teaches in our class and has written the treatise on this, calls this new spirituality cobbled together eclecticism, all kinds of stuff. And I got in trouble with some pastors because I called it an amorphous metaphysical stew pot. But it really is a stew pot, and there's about 8 qualities I'm going to talk about. And all New Agers don't believe in all 8, but they believe in enough of them that it diverts their attention away from Jesus. But their contention is pantheistic. If you look on the back of that outline, there should be a thing called Appendix B. And Appendix B is kind of a breakdown of how Christians and pantheists and panentheists look at the same issue. The pantheist believes that everything is God. My Buddhist philosophy teacher, when I started at CU, was my first class, he said, God is this podium. And I thought, maybe I picked the wrong school. But he was a terrible teacher. But man is only slightly more important than the plants and animals. The eugenicist, utilitarian Princeton teacher, Peter Singer, would teach that animals and humans are the same, and they should be humanely killed like the useless and defective animals. And somebody at our class last week mentioned that, and I said, that's another reason I don't retire. I don't want to be useless in the new culture. But there is no personal God, according to them, just a force. Panentheism, however, is a belief that there is a God, but he's incompetent. And when you hear the term co-creator, we are co-creator with God, you know that you're dealing with a panentheist. And the panentheist believes that there was a God, maybe even a powerful God, but he's either dead or he sort of gave up, and he's not a miracle worker. He's more or less an incompetent God and needs our help to accomplish anything. Some of this is, some people used to call this process theology. Reinhold Niebuhr was a famous panentheist that taught at Union Theological Seminary, and even the atheists liked Reinhold Niebuhr. But the question you ask is, as a Christian, well, who created this force? And the panentheists will say, well, God created it and then he left. They're sort of deists. What the panentheists want, we want a God, but we want to be able to turn him on or off like a light button when we need him. The second premise, and this is a critical one because I think it divides Christianity from all other religions, is that their belief that man is inherently good. And I know all my kids went through school in the 70s and all, and they were taught the self-esteem in almost every class. And Christians, because of Eve's fall, believe man is inherently defective and needs God and needs a belief in God. One of my children had their first baby, and he had been up like 3 nights in a row with this little baby. And he called me up. He said, Dad, now I actually believe in original sin. and he's never backed off that premise, but children are a high challenge. And, but the pantheists or pantheists would believe that God is not fully capable and that Jesus was not divine. He was not part of God. He was not in the Trinity. He was just a genius. And self-esteem, narcissism is a good thing. Carl Jung, when I was in school, the psychology teacher says, we don't bring religion into this class. We're scientific. And if you are Christian, fine, just don't talk about it in the psychology class. But if you really want a spiritual life, you can look at Carl Jung. And Jung was part of the Jungian theology, well known now, that if you're a psychiatrist, you could be a Freudian, or you could be a Jungian believing in a spirit. Well, Jung was very clever at covering up his true feelings, but they found his red book that he had left, a beautiful journal of his true beliefs. The family, after he died, tried to keep it a secret and ended up being litigated, and it's now public. There's actually a movie, I think it's called A Dangerous Method, talking about Carl Jung and how he drifted away from Freud and contended there was a spirit life, and he would call this the collective unconscious. And but when they found his red book, he admittedly in the book was possessed and conversed almost daily with 5 demons in his garden in Zurich. So man could be divine according to him if he will simply look to himself. The goodness is inside. Man is inherently good, and there's this good. Some people would call this a conscience. Conscience, I think, mostly is a learned response, except for that baby at 3 a.m., and ends up getting overtaken by selfishness and greed and sin. But they believe man is learning and evolving, reincarnating to become a better creature. Episcopal Bishop John Shelby Spong, he retired, now he's a Harvard divinity professor, said this, we do not need the divine rescuer, Jesus, who battles demonic forces of a fallen world. That world has passed away, for if humanity had become human by passing through apehood, it seemed plausible that he was headed toward godhood. So this chronological pride, like in every way we're getting better and better and better and better, and that's true in computer science and nothing else. And but that is the lie. Joseph Campbell was a famous teacher on PBS and perpetuating that lie. Statistics, of course, disprove this. Illegitimate births, 41% the last 3 years. And crime is up, murders are up. There's really no evidence that man's morally improving. And to quote Paul Johnson, it's in the outline. Paul Johnson was a well-known, he's probably dead by now, historian at Oxford and a Catholic. He said, quote, Without God, we would become morally nothing better than a species of fantastically clever monkeys. If you're Darwinist, maybe that's what they believe. The third premise is moral relativism. Boy, we see this every day. There are many roads leading to God: everythingism, subjectivism, theological pluralism. I think the leading proponent of this is Oprah Winfrey. She, quote, has said, "The biggest mistakes is to believe there's only one way. Actually, there are many diverse paths leading to what you call God. So if you're just a good person, try to be a good person, you'll get there." And that's her contention. We'll talk about her again because she is very much like Carl Jung, very affected by spirit guides, what we would call demons. But sin, according to the New Ager, is a relative term, and that guilt should be avoided. We just make mistakes. And the Christian said that, well, Jesus is the only way, as he said in John 14:6, Acts 4:12, and several other citations in the Bible. Christians admit that there are differences in human beings, but Jesus reached out to all because God does love all. He sent Jesus when we were all sinners and undeserving. Moral reality to a New Ager is merely one's perceptions. It has now turned to a racist thing where reality is now what's your language, what's your race, what's your sex and gender, etc. And Charles Colson, before he died, said that this has become the golden age of exoneration. In other words, the culture doesn't believe there's really very much sin. You see this in the gender issues in Ivy League school. There's no core requirements like at Stanford or the Ivy League schools and other places if you want a degree in liberal arts. When I went to CU, there were these 2 years of compulsory, you could do this or this or this or this, but you had to take one or the other. And one of my granddaughters graduated from a school, Salisbury in Maryland, a couple years ago, and her major was elementary education and gender studies. And so I looked in their academic bulletin, and it was like almost history and gender studies and history. And so this is supposed to be a college and not a political campaign. But Ted Koppel said it many years ago. He said the 10 Commandments are not the 10 suggestions, and mankind needs rules, and the rules are set forth there and they still apply. The millennial today is experiential. It's how are you feeling? And feelings are a big thing. If it feels right, it must be right. And the 10 Commandments don't say that. Satan appealed to Eve, did God really say? Questioning, doubting. And when you see a teacher saying things like faith is doubt, the pantheist progressive Christian will say faith is doubt. If you're not doubting, you don't really believe. And I think that's just a lie. When I became a Christian, my first reaction is everything seems so clear now that I've been wondering about. Gnosticism or you could call it mysticism. Neo-Gnosticism is what I would call it, is an additional inner secret or mystical knowledge that will allow each to become more at one with the infinite force of love. It's a secret thing, a mystical thing. Christian response is that God destroys all human plans, no matter how wise they may seem. But the idea that brilliant men can figure all this out is repudiated in the New Testament in 1 Corinthians 18 through 25. The mystical God was revealed by Jesus, and the veil leading to the holy place was torn in half. The leading proponent of Gnosticism is a lady called Elaine Pagels. She's a professor at Princeton and has been on PBS a lot. And she claims the fear of Satan was made up by Christians so they can demonize their opponents. So that's how it got tipped upside down. One of the fellows that endorsed this book, a guy named Bob Villari, calls this Topsy-Turvyism, where there are many days you turn on the TV and you're hearing things preached that are, are completely upside down. And Gnosticism would be one of them. The Da Vinci Code was an example claiming that Jesus was married, and the Da Vinci painting, that's not John leaning towards Jesus, that's Mary Magdalene, and Jesus had a thing for her, and there's really no proof of that whatever. The only proof is the Gnostic Gospels were discovered in 1945 in Nag Hammadi, Egypt, and they were, I think, written in Coptic, and they really don't repudiate the divinity of Jesus. I have a couple of things to clarify. My wife says nuns are not N-U-S, N-U-N-S, they're N-O-N-E-S. The nuns are fine, the other nuns might not. Closer. Oh, wow, that's something. Everybody hear well now? Okay, if I'm driving you nuts too loudly, let me know. Rich brought up something also, universalism. We talk about it specifically in the book. It combined with Unitarianism and Universalism. Universalism is a denomination that is largely, I would say, panentheist. They are very strong on worshiping nature, and the pluralism of Oprah Winfrey, all roads lead home, are similar to the Universalists. She would not claim to be a Universalist, I don't think, but now on about page 3 or 4, well, the number 13, it comes out of the old outline. The book started in the old outline. When we got to page 80 in our outline, my paralegal told me, I think you need to make this a book. This is too long for an outline. So that's where it started. But meditation and visualization, this is very common, the practice of yoga, centering prayer, contemplative spirituality. The latest thing is breath work. And where this, either through exercise or breathing, is a process of, in the case of yoga, physical activity, which is quite good. But the goal ultimately, when you get at 4.0, is to empty your mind. And centering prayer was the same thing. You would begin to think of things, you would meditate, just be quiet, and then as extraneous thoughts would come into your mind, you'd use a word to get rid of it. One of my Christian friends got into this, and the word he used was Jesus, because he knew that there was a trap here. And so he would use Jesus, till his mind got empty. The problem with that is when the mind gets empty, what goes in? James Montgomery Boyce, a great Presbyterian pastor, said, when you empty the mind, it's like having Satan sit down to your computer and reprogram it. And that comes back to the premise, are we inherently good or not? If our empty mind is going to lead us to goodness, then we're inherently good, perhaps. but usually it leads to Satan finding an entry portal it says this in the Bible. This old new idea of the power of positive thinking, for example, comes into your mind and you begin to believe that you're inherently good. Power of positive thinking was very popular when I was a kid. And my mother was reading Life Begins at 40, written by Norman Vincent Peale. Yeah, I told her, I said, no, Mom, life ends at 40. Yeah, how wrong I was. But the Bible encourages us to meditate, but not to empty our mind. Jesus said the purpose of your Christian life is to love God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. And he means each one of those things. But the Bible encourages us to meditate on the Bible. And Psalm 119, verses 15 and 16. And that means that you meditate on the Word of God. And we'll go into that later. But there's so many of these mind-emptying things. Every new thing you hear about seems attractive in a society like ours, where we support the free interchange of ideas and the First Amendment. The next premise this is called page 15, is that man can heal himself by directing this inner force that he has, this inner goodness, to the disease. And my example of the New Age guy that tried this was Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs, invented Apple and was very prominent. The irony is, I think he was raised in a Missouri Lutheran home. He was adopted by the parents, but he rejected it. He was too smart for that. And when he got pancreatic cancer, it was a kind of pancreatic cancer that's treatable. And his wife begged him to go see the doctor and start treatments. He refused to do that, and he had either in his house or in his office a white room. It was all white. And he would go in and meditate and direct his inner goodness to defeating the pancreatic cancer. And the result was he died. So there's a danger in all of this. The idea that you're inherently good is especially attractive to people that are incredibly smart, and he was. Healing can be a spiritual gift through Jesus Christ, and the main thing is, if you're praying about healing, God sometimes heals, sometimes doesn't, but whatever His will needs to be done. And especially if you see a miracle happen, and I've seen a few of these, be sure you thank Jesus and not yourself. But the pride that people get thinking that they had this inner force, this inner power that could heal sickness is a huge mistake. And the overwhelming evidence, if you compare Christianity to any other form of world religion, we're incredibly healthy on average. We tend to live longer. We tend to have a balanced life and tend not to die early. The next premise is salvation by deeds. I think Christians got into this with Pelagianism and the idea that if you do good works, you will go to heaven. Completely wrong and completely topsy-turvy. Martin Luther, when he hit on Romans 16 and 17, said it's by faith that you believe, and that it has nothing to do with good deeds. The good deeds are a consequence of faith and a thankfulness to God that He's empowered us to do good things and enjoy doing them. The other factor in this is that we're also saved by grace. Grace and faith go together. I can teach this till I'm blue in the face, and if God has not opened the heart and mind of the people that are listening by grace, whatever purpose He has, that's absolutely necessary. until you're really seeking and longing to know, you're not really going to listen to the reasons. The reasons are rational, good reasons, but a friend of mine, I know he's a genius, he should be a Christian, and sharing the faith, he ends up blaming God. He said if there was a God, he wouldn't have made me such a big sinner. So it's all his fault. It's really topsy-turvy. He's not ready to hear the word. But that's some of the rationale. The emergent churches got very popular in the late 90s and are still around. They kind of renamed themselves. Satan's not stupid. He's not going to play the game that you expect him to play. He's going to make it seductively sound truthful and get you involved. And it's like yoga, it entraps you with this. The last premise, and I'm right on time, is reincarnation, is the successive embodiment of the soul in different mortal bodies. In other words, the idea, well, I've been here before. When you get to be my age, you say that a lot. Well, I've been here before, I remember. And why do I remember stuff like when I was in 3rd grade and I can't remember what I had for breakfast? That's just old age. Whereas the resurrection is a transformation of mortal bodies into immortal ones. Shirley MacLaine says reincarnation is just like showbiz. You just keep doing it over and over until you get it right. The problem with the New Age is there's no right. It's moral relativism, so they really don't have a doctrine that they will defend, and they can't defend. So this idea of reincarnation leads people into what is known as channeling. And channeling is a situation where you have visions, maybe from your dead mother, of what you should do. And this has gotten very common. Hillary Clinton was in this. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, famous psychiatrist, on Death and Dying was her famous book, and it's really a good book. But she got into channeling with what she knows as spirit guides. And Oprah Winfrey is in this. And the spirit guides are people that talk back to you. When you meditate and you empty your mind, all of a sudden you're hearing voices. That's a danger signal. But for people that don't really know God, they think, well, God's talking to me. And I'm special, and I need to listen to him. We're talking about the Episcopals to Rick, Reverend James Pike. 40 years ago, Pike came to Longmont and was part of a lay lecture institute that was held. I thought he was pretty good. I was not a Christian at that time. But anyway, he got in, he had a son that committed suicide. And he was deeply grieving over this. And all of a sudden, he started to get visions that he could communicate with his son. He left the priesthood. He ended up dying in Qumran in the desert, got lost in the desert. But anyway, here was a brilliant man who got into channeling with his dead son. And it's a very, when you get your spouse dying or your mom or dad and you struggle with that and you start to hear voices. When you're as old as I am and you practice law for as long as I have, I had a situation where this happened, and there was a boy who borrowed his brother's motorcycle and went up Boulder Canyon, was in an accident and died. Well, the brother blamed himself and started to have visions of his brother talking to him. And he was a good kid. He was in the Air Force, actually, and one night he committed all 7 common law crimes, called the Cherry Creek Rapist. He had never committed a crime before, and he never committed a crime after. And inadvertently, I was his lawyer for like one day. And he's still down in Canyon City. He's claims to be a Christian. He's a silversmith now. But he grieved so much over this dead brother that Satan took over and said, well, here's a dead brother. Satan's not stupid, and it's absolutely critical that we understand that he is not stupid and that he means bad for us. The people that get into this deeply have a huge suicide rate. And Satan's goal is to lead you down the path to join him in hell soon. And so it's dangerous. And the defense for us as Christians is to make sure we're well grounded in the Bible. We don't get into the New Age ideas, remembering that Satan always kind of puts a truthful facade or a good thing into his philosophy. Let's, if you have your Bibles, whoa. That's my little Bible. It shouldn't break the, here we go. Could you, well, it's not, it's going to fall.
Not sure how.
Oh, yeah, that's good. Oh,
But
terrific.
will it gradually sink? Probably
Is
will.
it just too heavy?
Yeah.
All right.
The heavy thinker is a lot.
I have 20/20 vision, but it doesn't always work with really fine print. Well, let's turn to Ephesians 6, starting at verse 10, talking about demons really. Finally, be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power. Put on the full armor of God so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authority, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Therefore, put on the full armor of God so you can, that when the day of evil comes, you may be able to stand your ground. And after you have done everything to stand firm then with the belt of truth buckled around your waist and with the breastplate of righteousness in place and your feet fitted with the readiness that comes from the gospel of peace. In addition to all this, take up the shield of faith with which you can extinguish all flaming arrows of the evil one. Take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God, and pray in the Spirit on all occasions with all kinds of prayers and requests. With this in mind, be alert and always keep on praying for all the saints. So I thought on Halloween that was very appropriate. All Saints' Day is tomorrow. Halloween is very much misunderstood. Halloween is All Saints hallowed. And that was a Christian custom after Jesus to repudiate the festival of devil worship and the Druids in the unbelieving world. So we're going to pass out candy tonight, and God bless all the little children. Now, questions? We got time? Yes. Bruce, you ready to pray? I'll stay a little longer for questions, but
No, well, first, I really want to thank you, Dave. Thanks so much, and thanks for, and a good segue, by the way, to what we're going to do next week in terms of suffering and how suffering can indeed stimulate our need for God. That'll be one of the points that we'll be making. But really, the point I want to make is thank you so much for